My name is Jamie. I work here at JourneyTEAM with all the other folks you'll see on the call today that are presenting, and we are excited to have you here. Maybe good afternoon, depending on where you are, but welcome to the Copilot Readiness webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about a Copilot and the things that it may be doing to impact your company in the coming future here as you implement that. But as we get started, I want to make you aware that we are recording this webinar and it will be made available after the presentation along with the slide deck if you prefer as well. To keep things moving, we have muted everyone. So if you have questions, please do me a favor, type them in the chat. We will address them as we can in chat, and or at the end of the session, we will also be having a Q&A section of the presentation. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about who we are first. We are JourneyTEAM. We're a premier Microsoft partner with several awards to show for it, including Partner of the Year 2 years in a row. We're one of the best places to work per Inc. magazine, and we have several solution partner specialties from Microsoft. Our company consists of over 150 team members and growing quickly, actually, with hundreds of active customers. And this year, in fact, this month, we're celebrating 30 years in business, and we are excited about that. We cover the gamut of the Microsoft stack from ERP to CRM, all the way over to BI and Azure and Microsoft 365. So in addition to Copilot, we can help you with a lot of the things you're dealing with inside of the Microsoft stack. So please feel free to reach out at any time, and we can do what we can to help you there. So at the end of this call, real quick, you must be present to win, but if at the end of this call, if you're still on, we are going to have a drawing for a free identity security analysis, which is something, it's a product that we offer. And that's a $3,000 value, and it will help you get ready for Copilot because it will make sure your tenant's in the right state to start taking on this new artificial intelligence technology. So now that you know all of that, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to discuss today. Artificial intelligence is all the rage right now, and Microsoft has implemented or is in the process of implementing AI into most, if not all, of its products. The common term they're using for that implementation is called Copilot. We're planning on having some deeper dives on Copilot at the beginning of next year at our Business Technology Summit event, so keep an eye out for that event. But today, we want to discuss with you a little bit about how you should be preparing to get ready for Copilot and what it's going to do to expose and change the way that you work. Our capable presenters today are Jared Foley and Kevin Zollinger, two of my colleagues from the modern work and security practice here at JourneyTEAM. They love digging into this technology, and they're excited to share with you the things that they're learning about what Microsoft is doing and how you can get the most out of it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin and let him take it away.
Awfully sweet of you, Jamie. We appreciate it. Let's start by talking a little bit about the roles that Jared and I are going to play. When we talked about how we describe and how we prepare for Copilot, I was like the offensive head or the defensive head coach because I was worried about keeping everything safe and secure. And Jared, he is Joe, not as the glass half full, it's like overflowing. He was so excited about Copilot that he jumped into it immediately. And so we kind of play those two roles, and we're going to split it up that way a little bit. We do want to start, though, with a discussion of how Copilot really works. And I want to say that we are going to stay at a very high level. And so we're not going to do any PhD level math. I'm not going to try and explain to you what a semantic index is or how it works, mostly because I don't know how it works. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we pay the pointy head guys to figure out, and we use it. And so what we're going to do is look at Copilot from the point of view of a user, and there are some things that we should understand as a user, and we're going to cover that. We want to start with the idea of a Chinese room, and this was an experiment done by John Searle a million years ago. And what he said is if we took somebody and put them in a room with an input and an output, and we gave that person a recipe book, and we passed in a piece of paper with some Chinese on it, he could take that recipe book, find that statement, those symbols, and then find the same symbols that match it and pass it back out. And if those symbols were conversational, it would appear as if the guy in the room spoke Chinese, but he didn't. That's the Chinese room experiment, and that really describes, for me, how a traditional search engine works. I say I want this, and it goes out and it looks in its recipe book or its index, and it returns, here are all the things that matched what you searched for. And it's a very one-to-one relationship. We then went to a little deeper level and started playing with what they call large language models. And this isn't exactly accurate, but for me, I think of Google or Bing as being large language models because they have this index that has 1 billion words in it. And they can then go and give me all of the relationships between those words. And when you get into a large language model, one of the things that they start doing is they start talking about relationships. And so we're going to talk about vacation and holiday. And if I'm asking Google what the best place to vacation is, when it goes out and looks in its large index, it's going to look for vacation and it's going to look for holiday. Do you have any holidays planned?
None.
No, we work all the time. So we then go to the next step, and that's generative AI, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Generative AI uses deep learning and neural networks to go out and get even deeper relationships. So they get beyond the idea that a holiday and vacation are the same, and they get into the details and they get into the meaning of those phrases. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that the intelligence knows anything, because it doesn't. And that's one of the important things we're going to talk about today, is that artificial intelligence doesn't really know anything. It just knows how to make connections. And so if we talk about generative AI, and Copilot specifically uses something called the semantic index, which is unique to Microsoft. That semantic index, if you went out and searched just on Bing and said, I want to look for March sales result, it's going to find all the documents that say March sales result. And that's all it's going to give you. But with the semantic index, it's going to know that sales reports are produced by Kelly, and she works in the finance team, and she produces those reports in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. And so that's what a semantic index does for you. And that's something that's unique to Copilot. You might even say that that's the secret sauce of Copilot, is it does that semantic index using Graph, which is another Microsoft technology, to give you the answers that you're looking for. So here are some examples of generative AI, and we all know ChatGPT. You've got the $20 a month Pro. We're all paying $20 a month to the fine folks at OpenAI so that we can talk to the more advanced ChatGPT. There's also Claude.ai and Bard AI that are either being invested in by Google or owned by Google, and then Dolly, which is used by ChatGPT and designer.microsoft.com to create pictures. And all of my pictures, in fact, were created with artificial intelligence. And so this one comes from Microsoft Designer. We'll see some later on that come from DALL-E. Those are examples of what generative AI does. So let's talk about Copilot more specifically. And there are 3 flavors of Copilot that I think of. I think of Bing Chat. And so if you go to chat.bing.com, there it is. There's Bing Chat for Enterprise, and then Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is what we're here to talk about today. Bing Chat and Bing Chat for Enterprise are available to you right now. And the difference is, if it's Bing Chat and you put in a question, that question then goes out and goes through a process that we're going to talk about. Your question and any content that you included in your question is saved by that large language model and then later used to train that large language model, and whatever you put in your prompt can also be returned to answer subsequent questions. And so Bing Chat, it's all out in the open, it's all public. Bing Chat for Enterprise, anything that is in your prompt and your prompt itself is not saved nor used to train the artificial intelligence. And so if I have the secret recipe for Coke and I put it into Bing Chat for Enterprise and say, translate this into Farsi, that isn't then later used for somebody else. And so it stays secret. And then Microsoft 365 Copilot does that. But the other thing it does is it uses the content in your tenant to generate answers. And as we think about the value of the content that we have in our tenant, that's super exciting. And remember, I'm the defensive coach here. I'm worried about keeping it safe. He's the offensive coach. You saw him nod his head when he got excited about that. That content makes all the difference. And it's going to be world changing. In that black box, there's some other places that Microsoft is surfacing the Copilot technology. We aren't going to talk about that today. We do have folks here at JourneyTEAM that can. So if you want to talk about how to use Copilot in the sales process in Dynamics, we can hook you right up. We're not going to do that today. All right, so with that, As the defensive coach, I'm going to hand the football off to my offensive coach, and he's going to tell us why he is so excited about Copilot.
Well, the biggest thing for me is, wouldn't we all like to have an assistant? If you want to raise your hand or put an emoji, how many of you wish there was more hours in the day? You struggle to find time. Oh, I'm already seeing one hand right there. I think this number should be much higher than 64%. I know from my personal experience, I wish there was more hours in the day to get my stuff done. This is a great solution to help with that. Just in the last few years, since February 2020 with the pandemic, there's 3 times the usage of tools like Microsoft Teams for online meetings or Zoom products out there. And that is just going to keep skyrocketing. Since that infrastructure was built, companies aren't going to go away from it after they had to build it out. 70% of us in this study have said that we would lessen our loads if we could pawn that work off on AI. And 2%, 2 times the likelihood that leadership would go to AI versus laying you off. So you don't need to worry about losing your job. The trick is we want to use AI in the form of Copilot, make this a tool to work with us. If you think about when we were in high school, when I was in math class, the calculator was forbidden. You were not allowed to have a calculator in math class. But I'm told, I don't have any kids, but I'm told that children now, the calculator is a tool that you use in math class. So how do we turn this into a tool instead of running away from it? So a couple cool things here. I'll show you some videos Microsoft's provided of how Copilot works in the apps that we use today. So for example, here in Excel, you now have a chat window inside of your Microsoft apps. And in here, you could type, here's my financial statement, analyze the numbers and give me the data that I need. Another thing that I love, I struggle so much with getting the formulas to work in Excel. I now could just type in, add up the sum of this cell to this cell and have Copilot help me out with that. The hours that I would save from Googling and searching how to do something or trying to find somebody that knows Excel better than me to help me with that or to try to analyze the data can easily be handed off with just a couple of words, asking Copilot to help me out. Oh, there we go. This one is my favorite. I can tell you that jobs that I've had, if I wasn't up at 3 in the morning replying to emails, I would wake up and I'd have 200 emails and I would be buried in my emails. I love this. Copilot now will integrate with New Outlook. You can have it scan all your emails, look for the important things, look for the things that really need an immediate response. You can have Copilot draft a reply for you. And where it gets really cool is, as Kevin was talking about, with Copilot being integrated with the graph, it can look for those other documents that I have available to me. So if I needed to write an email talking about a sales proposal that was sent out and I have access to that sales proposal, I can have it draft a draft email based off of the contents of that sales proposal. And all I have to do is just tag that file. So this is a huge productivity booster of just having Copilot work my email box for me. Microsoft Teams. How many of you joined this meeting late? Go ahead and raise your hand. This is really cool because the first 5 minutes you may have missed in the meeting, you can now have Copilot summarize. Oh, Brent raised his hand. He's my boss, so I can give him a hard time for being late to the meeting. You can now have Copilot tell you, here's what you missed in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. The other really amazing thing that Copilot is doing is it's paying attention to what you said and others said. It'll decide whether there was a disagreement or if we agreed on something in the conversation. And now when that meeting is over, you have a recap of somebody asked you to do something, or if you asked somebody to do something, if there was an agreement on an item or a disagreement on an item, that is all documented automatically by Copilot. And then again, talking about being connected to Graph, you could draft an email, you could draft a PowerPoint presentation based off of what was said in this Teams meeting. Word. I would love to have this tool in high school. So again, like your email with Outlook, you could have it draft a Word document based off of a business proposal, based off of that Teams meeting you were just in, or have it pull a PowerPoint document and draft a content. The thing that I love is, this isn't going to replace me needing to write a Word document about something, but it will give me a really good, can it do our taxes? It will do a good starting point where now all you're having to worry about is tweaking the things here and there and fixing things, as opposed to having to start from scratch, writing something out that might have taken you a half hour or 45 minutes. And last but not least, PowerPoint. Again, the reverse of what I just said. You have a Word doc, you have a PowerPoint, you have a spreadsheet or something that you need to reference. You can have Copilot build a PowerPoint deck for you based off of those documents, the notes in a meeting, an email. All that data is all connected, and you can simply tag that, your OneNote in this video here, and your slide deck will be created in a matter of seconds. And again, it's just a matter of just tweaking those things. So the concern is, what about all that data that Copilot can see?
So you've turned the ball over
Yep.
on down. This
Yep.
time to play defense.
Yep.
Let's talk about how Copilot works with a few more pictures, just so that we have an understanding. This is a drawing provided by Microsoft. And we talk about, we're going to start with a Microsoft 365 application, and we're going to ask a question or ask it to do something. Maybe we're going to create this PowerPoint. It takes that prompt and it runs it through Copilot, and it does what's called pre-processing or grounding. I don't know if you've noticed this, but anytime I'm talking to Bing Chat or Chat GPT and I say, here's what I want, it goes away and it thinks for a minute, and then it comes back and says, here's what I'm really going to ask the search engine. And it always changes. And I play a little game. I try and get as close as I can get to the post grounding so that it changes as little as possible. That may be weird. I don't know. But it's going to take your prompt and it's going to interpret it and ground it. And that grounding then makes it so that it's more useful when we search for it. One of the secret sauce parts of Copilot is it is grounding it using Microsoft Graph data from your tenant. And so you talked about reading your email, right? Well, if you're in an organization that's using Teams Voice in addition to Outlook, Graph knows who I call, it knows who I message on Teams, and it knows who I email. And so it can use that to say, okay, I can see that you talk to Jared on Teams Voice 32 times a day. I'm going to treat his email as a little more important. And so it runs through that grounding using that data from the graph, and then sends it back through Copilot. And it goes out to the same OpenAI large language model as you use at openai.com. There are a couple of differences there. The first is that your customer data never goes to OpenAI. And so if you've got the recipe for Coca-Cola stored on your tenant, that doesn't go to OpenAI. It never leaves. In fact, OpenAI nor Microsoft can read the content in your tenant without permission. You can ask Microsoft to get into your tenant, they will, but there's an insane process that they have to go through before they do that. So your secret content stays inside your tenant. It never leaves. So it goes through and it gets a lot of information. It does the relationships. It then brings it back to your content. And again, using Microsoft Graph does post-processing. And so then once again, it looks at your content, it looks at the relationships based on the data in your content, and then it returns your response and it builds your PowerPoint or whatever the case may be. Now, we've been kind of watching the messages and we've been talking about who's going to do whose taxes. Your taxes aren't going to live in your tenant, so that's a bad example. But if we were talking about this as a person, you don't want your income information, for example, to go out to the World Wide Web. And the thing about the way that this has been architected is that content stays in your tenant. It's always secure. Microsoft has had 148 years of running Microsoft 365, and I may exaggerate a little bit. And so they know how to keep your content secure, and they do that here in Copilot. So with all that said, what are we not worried about? We're not worried about eavesdropping. We all know that your content as it sits in your tenant is always encrypted. Now, you may have a sensitivity label, which adds another layer of encryption on it. You may be one of those organizations that really cares about security, and so you may have done the bring your own key, and so it's now encrypted a third time. All of that still is there, even when Copilot is accessing the information. When you ask a question and include in that question maybe some source code, that source code never goes out anywhere outside your tenant. And so you don't worry about where your prompt goes. And the last thing is, you don't worry about copyright infringement. When we were building this deck, there was a picture that I had used, but we didn't really know who owned it. And so I couldn't use it. If I'm using OpenAI or some other content provider, I don't know that I'm protected against copyright claims. If I'm using Copilot, I am. Microsoft has publicly said that they're going to stand up for us and protect us. And so anything that's created by OpenAI, Microsoft takes the responsibility for that, and they will protect us from any sort of copyright infringement action. If you own a business or you're responsible for a business, that's tremendously important. Okay, so let's talk about the word security trimmed. we all worry about the wrong person seeing the wrong content, even inside of an organization. If you're a company that deals with credit card information, you already know that you've got to go through an audit every year. And part of that audit is you have to prove to the PCI folks that you're taking care of those credit card numbers. And so we have this idea that only some people should see credit card numbers. Copilot security trims any results. And so it will not create an answer based on information that the questioner. So if I ask a question, it's not going to base its answer on information that I shouldn't have access to see or I don't have access to see, nor will it return documents that I haven't been given permission to see. So when Copilot does its grounding, it's based on my credentials. And so it only sees stuff that I can see. But there's a flip coin to that. And the flip side is it can see everything that I have the rights to see. And so if we've had some oversharing happen, and we're going to talk about that, it sees that oversharing. And so it can then return either the document that was overshared or an answer based on the content in that document to me. And so suddenly I'm seeing content that I shouldn't see. Now that if that's going on in your tenant, it's going on right now. And so Copilot doesn't change that. But what it does do is Copilot looks at your content differently than you do. And so as we've been talking about examples of how this might happen, if I asked for, tell me about social activities, and Copilot grounds that and decides I want social security numbers, and somebody has a document in a team that they've mistakenly shared that has the social security number of all the employees, I might get that document back, even though I didn't ask for it. And so Copilot is going to do its best to give us what we want. But sometimes if we're not careful and we don't have the proper security and sharing controls in place, it might return or surface content that I shouldn't really see. The other thing that is a big deal is rogue Copilot. And this is true of any artificial intelligence. I had a different word that I was going to put in there other than rogue, and we decided that that was perhaps too incendiary, and so we went with rogue. But the idea is that sometimes artificial intelligence is going to get it wrong. You may remember I talked about the idea that we've got this billion data point large language model, and we can know that these words mean these things. That doesn't mean that Copilot knows anything. It's out there making relationships, and if somebody else hasn't typed it in, it doesn't have access to it. And if somebody else has typed in something that's inaccurate, you're going to get an inaccurate result. I've got some examples here on the screen. At first, the purple box, actually, I cut and pasted that from a Microsoft page where they were talking about, and it was actually in Copilot training. This was a document for training in Copilot. And they wanted to warn us that the content was partially created with the help of AI, but that a human author, human is implied there, reviewed and revised the content. And that is the model that we're going to propose that you follow, is that anytime you get results back from Copilot, before you send that out to a customer, before you publish that on a blog, before you use it in production code, take a look at it, make sure it's accurate. That gray box on the left there, an author was coming up with examples of how Copilot got it wrong, and he asked for books about Abraham Lincoln, and he got back there. Number 4 is the Emancipation Proclamation. We all know that Abe wrote that himself, but in this case, OpenAI thought that was a book written by Gary Willis, who's written a different book about Abraham Lincoln. Brandon, I saw you say good data equals good data out, and that is completely true. I want you to just know that you nailed it, and we're going to talk about that as well in just a minute. This last one down here on the right, this New York lawyer sanctioned for using what turned out to be made up cases in a legal brief. So he's involved in a lawsuit, and his grandkids come in and tell him about this great tool that they've been using, and so he uses it to write a brief. And he looks at it, looks good. He even said to Copilot, hey, are these real cases? And Copilot, because Copilot's the best, let me step back. OpenAI, this wasn't Copilot, OpenAI, the world's best poker player, because it can lie straight face, said, oh yeah, those are real. So he turned it in. Opposing counsel looked at those cases, couldn't find them because they didn't exist. It cost that lawyer $5,000. I suspect it cost him the case, and it cost him a buttload of embarrassment. Don't be the company that gets embarrassed because you thought what an artificial intelligence was telling you was true without checking it out, okay? So those are some examples of rogue Copilot. If you go to Wikipedia and put in the word hallucination, it's going to give you its disambiguation page. One of the options there is artificial intelligence. And there's a whole list of ways that artificial intelligence can hallucinate. It can make stuff up. And so when Brandon talked about good data in equals good data out, bad data in equals a hallucinating artificial intelligence. And it's gotten better. It's better than it used to be, but we still need to look at everything that we get back from Copilot, ChatGPT, anybody, and make sure that it's appropriate. And it doesn't have cognitive errors, it doesn't have data errors, it's not scoping errors. Maybe it was content that was used out of context. We as humans need to look at that and make sure that that is accurate. So as a defensive coach, those are the things that I worried about the most. Let's talk about how we get Copilot ready. Somebody that we've never heard of, turns out he's a French author, said a goal without a plan is just a wish. And we've all heard that because it's a great quote. And so our goal is to use Copilot, and our goal is to use Copilot better. But if we don't quantify how we're going to get to better with Copilot, how we're going to save those time savings that Jared talked about, then we're just wishing, and wishing isn't good enough. Here at JourneyTEAM, we have this concept we call a flag plant. And I know that we have some current and past clients on the call. And so you know that we went through a process of defining a flag plant as part of our project. This is an example flag plant that I might propose that we could use for a Copilot project. And to me, it's important that the flag plant tells us what we're going to do, and it tells us how we're going to measure that success. And I'm the first to tell you that Copilot's going to be a little squishy, because how do you measure effectiveness? And so in this case, our goal for Copilot is we're going to use it to improve the quality of our meetings and communications, and we're going to measure that with quarterly Glint surveys. Glint is a part of Microsoft Viva, and we're going to use that to ask our employees, do you feel like you're being more successful in your meetings, and are we communicating better? And I know that's a bad example because it's hard to quantify and it's soft, and the engineer in me hates it, but you've got to have some way to know if your flag plant, your goal has been met using Copilot. We are proposing that there are about 5 steps that you're going to want to run through to use Copilot. And the first is we're going to talk about information architecture. Jared's going to talk about security, specifically about something called zero trust. He's going to talk about a sharing audit, or what you should be concerned about in terms of how people are sharing content. I'm going to talk about our adoption and change management program, and then the idea of starting with a pilot and then moving to production. So let's start with information architecture. You're looking at a picture that could double as an eye chart. And this, to me, and again, this came from the AI, and so the AI kind of was reading my mind here a little bit. This is what most content looks like in an organization. And as you think about the idea of telling a computer, artificial intelligence, go find me this document that's up in the upper left-hand corner that has this meaning, it's going to struggle as long as your architecture looks like that. And so by information architecture, we're talking about the art of configuring your content so that search works better, security works better, and it's easier to collaborate. Copilot doesn't change the need for you to do IA, but it enhances bad information architecture. And so it's important that we get that right. Information architecture is going to include things like identifying what your home site is, and identifying what sites are next to your home site, because search uses that to identify what content is authoritative. It might include setting up metadata so that we can tag data appropriately. It might include setting up sensitivity labels. And so Copilot can look at this content and say, this content here is sensitive, and so I need to treat it a little differently. There are lots of aspects of information architecture that we can leverage so that Copilot becomes better at giving you answers. This quote came from a product manager at Microsoft. I'm not going to read it to you. It'll show up on the slides that we're going to share with you later. But the idea here is that if we don't get our security and our identity correct, we are going to be sharing the wrong information with the wrong people. And if we do it on the wrong day, that's going to end up with you on the front page of the newspaper, and nobody wants that. So Jared, tell us all about security and identity.
All right. Well, first thing, if you go on most Microsoft pages, you're going to see these 2 words very frequently: zero trust. Microsoft's 2 favorite words, I think now. They want everybody to get to a zero trust mindset, get to that zero trust model. We want to give the least amount of privilege as possible to your end users. We want to get rid of the password and go to a passwordless method, whether it be Microsoft Authenticator, passwordless authentication with Authenticator. My favorite thing is to use a FIDO key. I don't even know my password anymore. Everything is done on a FIDO key. The least amount of access that we can give each other is the best starting point that we can have, because we want to protect our organization's data as is.
There's my photo key
There
right
it
there.
is, right there.
Yep.
And one of the biggest problems that Kevin kind of alluded to is that we have in organizations is oversharing. And I think it starts with just simple user error. How many of us have an S drive at our company, or just a network folder? Everybody just makes as a dumping ground, just puts all their files in there. I put this in the S drive so you can access this file. And then you have terabytes of data of all these files, and nobody knows what's in these files. Nobody knows who had it, let alone should I have access to be able to go into that folder, regardless if I'm a member of that department. We take this up a notch further. Any of these files that we have on SharePoint in different groups, other places in our OneDrives, and all these public folders that exist. If I have the ability to search it today, so does Copilot. So you mentioned, I'm going to look for details on the marketing social, and maybe I just Googled somebody's social security number that works in marketing because it was an HR document that the HR team thought was private to them. So the important thing here is we already have that problem of oversharing, and today we already have that ability to search those files. We just may not know that those files exist. So we want to start being mindful of that. Where are our files currently held? What are we doing with those files? And that's where we want to have that mindset with the zero trust and having just enough access. Microsoft already has tools in place, and these are tools that you should have already been doing. If you haven't, start using those tools today. Microsoft Purview is a great starting point. Setting up data loss prevention policies. This will start scanning your files, doing deep content analysis, just trying to find what is in the content of these files. Do we have social security numbers in there? Do we have PII data in there? Do we have all kinds of sensitive documents, data inside of those documents that maybe I shouldn't have access to do? Inside of those data loss prevention policies, we can also set up what we call sensitivity labels. And we can determine the rules of a file when it's given that label, what can be done with that file. Can it be shared out of the organization? Can it be who has access to be able to see that data? Who can modify that data? And we even have the ability to set up auto labeling. So take some of the work off of IT's back, where you can set up these certain things. If it meets this criteria, auto label it, and then you can go in and audit those files. The last thing we recommend is look at all of those groups that you have, those SharePoint groups, audit the memberships. Who should have access to those sites and files? Who should not have access? How many external users do you have that have access, guest accounts that are coming into those different groups? Should they have access to those files? Should those files be leaving the organization? These are all things that you want to audit today. And if this is something that might feel overwhelming, that's what we do every day. So come in and bring us in. We can help you with getting that analysis and basically getting your tenant in a very tight security posture before you flip that switch to turn on autopilot.
Yeah, and it would be awesome if we could ask Copilot, hey, am I oversharing anything? Or any of my people?
Yeah.
And the only person that's going to know if you're oversharing is you. And it becomes a mental exercise, because you look at an HR group and you're like, wait a minute. This group is set to public, and so anybody in the company can go find the content in that. This is HR. That shouldn't be the case. And so there has to be today a certain amount of human oversight as we talk about this. So let's talk about adoption and change management. There are some products that you look at and say, yeah, I flipped the switch on this and it's going to work, and people are going to be excited about it. Copilot may be one of those products where it's easy to think about. And we here use a process from ProSci, and we use the words ADKAR a lot, ADKAR. ADKAR is awareness, and so people are aware of it. Anybody in the world not know about Copilot? No, we all know about ChatGPT. We all know about artificial intelligence. We all know that Skynet is coming. Desire, the D. Anybody not want Copilot? Remember when we raised our hand earlier and people said, yeah, I want Copilot? If I asked you to raise your hand if your company is excited about Copilot, we'd see the same number of hands. You're all here for that reason. Knowledge is knowledge how to use whatever the tool is. And that's where we suddenly start to say, oh, maybe we do need adoption and change management. We're going to talk about Center of Excellence here in just a minute, but there's a good way and a bad way. There's an efficient way and an inefficient way to use artificial intelligence. And so knowledge does become important. Ability is turning it on. And again, Copilot, that could be fairly easy. And then reinforcement is, how do we reinforce the idea that people should be doing this new, whatever it is that we're trying to get folks to adopt. There is a way to do this properly, and there is a way to do it poorly. And given what difference this can make in how we work, it's my contention. I think Jared would agree with me. And I think all of y'all agree with the idea that if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like. So we have a Center of Excellence for Artificial Intelligence that we stood up a while ago. In one of the very first meetings, I remember Eric Bean saying, generative AI will be just as impactful as the internet was, which is a big statement. When you think about how impactful the internet has been in our lives, the idea that generative AI is going to be just as impactful, that kind of gives me an idea as to the scale of what we're talking about here. And I think Eric is entirely right. He then followed on to say, we need to get this right, and we need to help our clients get this right. This is the kind of thing where it's almost generational in terms of the way the technology works. And so we have to get it right. A Center of Excellence is one way to do that. So we meet on a cadence, and we talk about all the various ways that we're using artificial intelligence here at JourneyTEAM and how we can do it better and how we can be an example. As we talk about adoption and change management, one of the things that you frequently look for is a champion, or what I like to call a bright spot. And so those of us that work on that Center of Excellence are the bright spots or the champions for JourneyTEAM. That same pattern will apply at your organization. And so consider a Center of Excellence if you haven't already. The next thing that we want to talk about in terms of adoption is this whole idea of crawl, walk, and run. If I asked the audience to raise your hand, in fact, let's do that. Do any of you have Copilot at work right now? I suspect that you don't. I further saw we got one.
Got one. Yeah.
Okay, so that's exciting. Microsoft is approaching this crawl, walk, and run in their rollout of Copilot, and you should do the same. And so they're not flipping the switch and saying, okay, here it goes, have fun with it. They're not even doing that with Copilot for Windows 11. Even if you have the latest update at home on your Windows 11 device, you may not have Copilot for Windows 11. They're rolling it out very slowly. Microsoft does this internally as well. They have what they call dog food rings because they're going to eat their own dog food. And so they start with the product group, and then they talk with the department, and then the division, and then all of Microsoft gets it, and then it goes out to the early adopters amongst the public. I would propose that you would want to do the same thing as you talk about using artificial intelligence inside your organization. Get your Center of Excellence stood up, get that group to pilot it, get that group to figure out what works well, what doesn't work well. That group can help you start to look for what has been shared appropriately and what do we have concerns about. So use that crawl, walk, and run as you go through this. So we've talked about a number of things. We've talked about getting your identity right, getting your sharing right. We've talked about your information architecture, a lot of things that you should do to get Copilot right. Until last night, when I tried to find the original author of this, the best time to plant a tree thing, I used to think it was a Chinese proverb. Turns out it probably isn't, but it's still true. The best time to get started in getting your tenant Copilot ready was 3 years ago. Let's not say 30, let's say 3 years ago. The second best time is today. If you have intentions of using Copilot, let's be clear that Copilot is hard to come by right now. Not a lot of companies are getting access to Microsoft 365 Copilot. That doesn't change the fact that you will. And when you do, you want to be ready for it. And so work on your information architecture if that's not there. Work on your security and your identity and make sure that's set up properly. Work on your training so that your people, your team knows how they should share content appropriately so that the right content is shared with the right people. There's a right way and a wrong way to do that. Make sure that you get that done in the right way. And then the last thing that I want to share, and this is Gospel of Kev. Jared and I haven't talked about this at all, and so I don't know if he's going to agree with me. He might slap me upside the head. We all have this idea that we have to get Copilot first because we're all in competitive fields. We all have people that we're competing with for attention, for customer dollars, for whatever. And so we want to get there first. And I would propose to you that the more important part of Copilot is getting it right. So let somebody else go out first and make all the mistakes. You get it right for you, and then you turn it on. And so we talk about the turtle and the hare, right? And the turtle won because the hare wandered off. I would propose that the winner of the race isn't the turtle, nor is it the hare. It's the company that's well prepared. It's the company that knows what they're going to do with the tool, that has their flag plant defined, and is ready to rock and roll when that tool becomes available. And you can do that starting right now, even if you can't get Copilot. So go plant your tree. Here's some homework. These are things that Jared and I used as we built this deck. Copilot is super popular. If you go out and hit Copilot, if you Google that on Bing, you're going to get a trillion results. These are some of the ones that we've used. I don't know that these are the best. I would start with the zero trust overview there in the middle, and then that adoption link, the third one down. Those are great places to get started. These are all places that you can go and get more information about Copilot that will help you stand up your adoption program and get ready to use it. Any last words?
I had a thought, how many times does a technology come out and it just sits there and we do not use it?
Shelfware.
That center of excellence is going to be very important, getting people to understand the product. And I laugh because I think about this. I had a friend who has a smartphone who asked me for directions the other day, and I'm thinking, you've got GPS on your phone, use your tools. And so we want you to be using the tools that are available to you. So when Copilot does roll out, we don't want it to be money that is wasted to the organization. We want your employees using the tools that are available to them. So
I frequently say that, and the Microsoft 365 platform is about yay wide, right? It does everything that you could ever want it to do. Because of that, I know that neither Jared nor I have all the answers about even a small section, but there's just so much that it can do. And so as we talk about that adoption program, again, that knowledge, that K in the middle of ADKAR, that center of excellence can help develop that knowledge and then can help demonstrate that knowledge and can be a resource to the folks in your organization. Microsoft makes a big deal about center of excellence. Use it. Stand up a center of excellence and get that going. Don't wait for Copilot. And like you say, there are people that don't know that they can talk to their phone and get directions. The same thing is going to be true of Copilot and all the other generative AI. And so help your people understand that there's value there, that they should use it, and understand what your goals are for Copilot. I think Jamye is going to moderate our questions for us. We've been watching them go by as we've been talking, so I know there's some really good questions out there. Jamye, I will give you Jared's phone if you promise not to ask us any really hard questions.
I'll do my best. There was a lot of them flying through there, and I was trying to grab them all. I think we've got another list over here we're working through, and some of these may already, be semi-answered. So we'll give it a shot. I know I was watching in the chat to see which one of these have been answered by some of our folks that we've got in the chat actively working. So by all means, everybody, if you think you may have a question, you may want to review the chat and make sure it hasn't already been asked and answered. But also feel free to drop more in the chat as we're going through this. One of the first ones that came up, and I think we've kind of addressed this, but let's just readdress it because it's probably one of the bigger questions that happens in this scenario is the company data safe inside of Bing Chat and Copilot, right? We've said this in very different ways, I think, through the presentation, but just to let you guys reiterate on that point, does the data stay in the tenant? And how do we convince, this follow-up question, how did you convince IT departments to adopt Copilot, even though they might have those security concerns?
I'm going to assume that all of y'all have scanned the QR code so that you're out there already saying whether you liked the presentation or not. And I will say, you and I haven't talked about this, be honest in your feedback. If you didn't love it, if you thought we were awful, let us know. We'll get better next time. We want to know what you thought about this presentation so that we can do better in the next. But let's go back to this slide right here. So there are 3 versions of Copilot, and I'm not going to switch to that slide, but there's Bing Chat. And anything that you put into Bing Chat, so that's chat.bing.com, anything that, so if you load that with, here's a bit of source code, tell me how to make this more efficient, or here's a bit of source code, tell me how to add error logging to this. If you put that into Bing Chat, it's going to send that out to the large language model. It's going to get its answer, and it's going to give it back to you. It's going to take whatever code you put in that large language model, and it's going to use that to generate future answers. And it may even reproduce your code as an example. That's chat.bing.com. If you're using enterprise chat, then any question that you put into the chat and any source code or objects that you put into the chat is thrown away at the end of the chat. They go through the large language model, but then they're thrown away. Copilot 365, all of your content, and I think I can highlight, all of your content stays right here inside the graph. And so your content, your documents never leave your tenant. Your prompt leaves the tenant after it's been grounded. So it gets grounded here in the graph, and it goes out to the large language model. And so that's where the world's answers are. And then that answer comes back. And so after grounding, what you've asked may go out and come back, but your content never leaves the tenant, ever. And to me, as I think about secret sauce for Copilot, that is as a defensive coach, that's crucial. That's something that has to happen. And there's lots and lots of information on Microsoft.com that talks about how that works that you can share with your IT department.
A couple things I'll add. Bing Enterprise Chat is available now, and you can turn that on right now. You can go into your tenant, have your administrators flip that switch. And if you're using Microsoft Edge, you also can force end users with Intune or policy to force implicit sign-in where you're signed into Edge with your work credentials. When that step has happened, whether I go to Bing Chat or if I use the Edge extension where I click on the Copilot icon, I'm now in Enterprise Chat. I'm not in the public Bing Chat. So you can do that today. Flip that switch now, so that way you already have started protecting your data, because you know there are people at your organization using some version of AI. Start protecting your data now and get that switch flipped on.
Show of hands. I know that we have a super intelligent group on this call. Show of hands. How many of you decided in the last 4 or 5 months that Edge was better than you would have ever thought it was going to be? Anybody? Oh, look at that.
There's one.
Yeah.
Okay, there's 4 people.
Yeah, Edge. Center of Excellence, ADCAR, Adoption and Change Management. Get your people to at least investigate using Edge. As an administrator, it gives you so much more control over what comes into and out of your tenant. When we start talking about all the breaches that happen, Edge gives you a little more control over that, and every little bit of control that you get is amazing. Okay, next question, Jamie.
Yeah, so this one is also something we've kind of already discussed, but I want to make sure that I can try to address it basically with what was answered in the chat for those that might have missed it. Someone was asking, is there an ability to extend some of this outside of the cloud scenario, right, inside of your tenant? And the answer to that is, as of right now, there's a working list, I believe, of plugins that they're going to be putting in with Copilot. We've seen some with potential with Adobe, Smartsheet, even Oracle and SQL databases and that type of thing. But we're waiting on that. I think Microsoft's slow rolling that. They haven't published a comprehensive list. That was the answer to that scenario. But so initially, all the things we've been talking about, by the way, are Microsoft 365 Copilot related primarily. There were some other questions in there around sales things, and there is a Dynamics 365 Copilot. There are some other featured platforms inside of Microsoft where they are rolling Copilot. They're calling it Copilot in every one of them, which makes it extremely confusing, but they're rolling the Copilot technology into all of those platforms, either right now or over time. So if you have a particular question, I would make sure I'm searching for that specific thing. So for example, Copilot for sales inside of Microsoft, that type of thing is what I would look for.
Jamie, the one thing to remember is that Copilot is built on search. And so if you can see it from within Microsoft Search, then Copilot can see it. And so as we talk about these plugins, what we're doing is we're extending search to those other properties.
Yeah. And again, with the search, it's only the files that I have access to if I'm initiating the search. That's the only files that Copilot's going to give me access to. So the files that are available in the whole company, if I don't have permissions to view that file, it will never appear in my search. Just like today, if I was to search in SharePoint for a file, if I don't have access to it, it's not going to be there.
Excellent.
Good rule of thumb to remember.
Yeah, great one to remember. We are talking about language models here and some other, there's different types of AI for different types of content and technology, right? Do we know what version of ChatGPT this is built on? Is it on 4, 3.5, or is it even on the one of the questions was new 4 Turbo? I didn't even know that existed. So
I don't know, but I believe it's 3.5. Microsoft invested more money than we'll ever know how to count to in the OpenAI. I mean, they're a significant partner with OpenAI, and so my suspicion is that they're getting super early access and they'll be rolled into the new stuff as soon as they can. As a frequent user of ChatGPT, there is a big difference between 3 and 3.5 and 4 and 4.5 Turbo, and so I'm interested in the answer to that question as well. And I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the other quick questions, and I'm moving on through these, is I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We got about 9 minutes before the top of the hour, and we'd like to finish a few minutes early, just so everybody has time to get ready for whatever they have the rest of the day. Are there logs that are kept for things that Copilot has been asked or queried inside the environment so that you can do an audit or a trend on what questions are being used or asked?
I saw that question and I loved it. And I want to extend that question to say, what do we do with Copilot in the case of an e-discovery action? And the answer is different aspects of the Copilot experience are stored in different places. That is something that Microsoft thought of ahead of time to give them all the credit in the world. And so there are logs, and you can include Copilot queries and results in your e-discovery searches.
Got it.
Did you want to add to that?
Add to that. No, it's
Can't really add to that one, right? They're asking, there's been a lot of questions around cost. So I know you guys might have a slide on here to discuss that real quick if you want to talk about that for just a second. Just so everybody knows, there's a lot of answers going around here, and some folks may even be more aware because they've been pinging Microsoft relentlessly to find out. But right now it's a 300 seat minimum, I believe, with $30 per seat, which is one of the reasons why you're going to want to make sure you understand exactly what benefit this is going to have for your environment, right? For your organization. And is the cost, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? That's part of this discussion. And when you do squeeze it, you want to make sure that, as we've talked about in getting ready with all the security and the labels and all the different things that you want to do, you want to make sure that you're not opening yourself up for the Pandora's box, if you will, of AI inside of your environment. So I do expect, and there's been conversation in the chat, I do expect this licensing scenario to change over time. How fast, I don't know, but we all know, if any of you have worked with Microsoft as I have over 20 plus years, they will release something and then the licensing will change based on demand and how much they're doing. But let's be honest, these folks have been developing AI much like they develop in the big pharma world, right? They've been developing this for years, and now everybody's got to make sure that, number one, you really want it. So they're putting a little bit of a barrier there to make sure that you're going to turn it on. And the other piece, they need to get their money back out of all the research they've done to implement, right? So, eventually there might be a generic version, quote unquote, of Copilot that you can go get your prescription filled for. But right now it's probably going to be a little pricey. So you're going to want to make sure that you're going to need it and you can use it and make the most of it. Go ahead, guys.
So the 300 seats, I've seen conflicting information. I've seen some posts from Microsoft say it requires an E3 and an E5, and those are the only two licenses we're going to consider. I've seen other posts say you can also have business standard or business professional. You need 300 seats in your tenant. You don't have to license all 300 seats. And that $30 per month does require an annual commitment. So if you say, I'm going to go out and put 10 users on Copilot, you can certainly do that. You can assign the license to those 10 users, but you have to have 290 other users in your tenant. The other thing that I will say is, when we talk about awareness and desire, Microsoft has all of that. And so like you said, Jamie, everybody in the world is pinging Microsoft saying, give me, I want. They're picking and choosing where they turn this on, because it's a very, I don't want to say labor intensive, but to turn this on for a tenant, Microsoft goes through a lot of effort to get that up and get it right and make sure that it stays secure. And so if Jared asks for 10 seats and I ask for 1,000 seats of Copilot, Microsoft's going to talk to me first. And so we just need to kind of be aware of that. The other thing that I've seen floating around in the back channel chatter is the idea that Copilot is super energy expensive. And so there's a rumor, I don't believe this is true, there's a rumor that Microsoft's about to ask for permission to put little nuclear reactors in all their data centers to power all the Copilot. I think that's meant to be funny. Anyway, anything to add?
All right. I know there's a lot of other questions out there in the chat. Keep going. I've got folks out there that are trying to answer these for you guys. If by some chance you have a question we didn't answer, I didn't get to, I apologize. There's a lot of stuff flying around out there. And I want to make sure part of it's also context, right? That the question that your answer might have been asked at the moment something was said, and that's 5 minutes later now, and I don't know what it was talking about. But I know, just so everybody knows, when you're in, and this is kind of a general question that I think summarizes a few of these, just to go back and reiterate the security piece. When they're inside of Copilot or using the Copilot technology inside of the tools that they're licensed for with Microsoft, whether it's Teams, whether it's email, Word, whatever it may be, right? When they're using prompts inside of Bing Chat, enterprise chat, let me rephrase that, make that the right word. That is internal, and that chat prompt does not go out into the large language model. Is that correct?
The prompt goes out because the large language model has to see that to answer it. The difference is, once it's answered it, that chat is thrown away. If it's Bing Chat for consumer, they take that prompt, including any information that was attached to that prompt, they put it in the large language model and then later use it to answer other prompts. And so that's the big difference, is it with enterprise chat, it has amnesia. And so you're getting answers from the same place using the same technology, but your question is not then later used to train the robot. It gets amnesia and goes away. And whoever put the laughing icon in, thank you. I appreciate the idea that at least somebody got the amnesia quote.
Excellent. And so And now they'll log it, right? Because we talked about the fact there's an audit capability there, but that's logged internally to your logs, and then the chat is thrown away so that it's not maintained. Awesome.
The logging
Good
is
deal.
for Copilot for 365. I don't think that you have access to the enterprise chat or Bing chat logs other than what might go in or out of your firewall.
Good deal. I want to make sure we don't lose time. I want to announce the winner that we have for our identity security analysis, which we have over here. We pulled it out. Hopefully they're still here because you got to be present to win. And don't forget to fill out that survey. Take me back to the survey QR code if you wouldn't mind, for those who run the deal. Make sure you fill out that survey for a chance to win that $100 Amazon gift card. And so one last question. Is it possible to use Copilot in the company without all employees having access to all the data? And I believe that would be controlled by licensing. Would that not be true?
I heard a little different question there, Jamie, and it's what we keep saying. Jared said it 40 times and I've said it 15. Copilot can see everything that person can see.
Yep.
And so,
Okay.
so your search goes into data that you have access to, and the results come back out of that. And so it's totally possible to run Copilot without them having access to all of the data in the enterprise. And you assign Copilot licenses to individuals. And so you can choose who does and doesn't have Copilot access.
Right. So all the more important reason, the word readiness, we chose that word specifically, folks. This is a type of thing this is like training your kid. I'm going through this right now. It's like training your kid to drive. Okay. You have a whole year with a permit. The reason why is because you don't want to let them loose on the road without proper things in place, proper training for them to understand nuanced things, for you to take them and put them in unique situations and understand stuff. That's what this readiness is for, guys. You guys need to make sure, because I know we come across customers all the time who think they know what they know and think they know things are locked down, or think they know this person doesn't have access to XYZ, and come to find out they were mistaken. Right. And so that's what the readiness is for, is because Copilot is going to use everything that you're already working on and in. You need to go back to everything that you're working on and in and make sure it is ready to be consumed by Copilot properly and the way you prefer it to be. And it's going to be different, right? The way your policies, the way your company works. Some folks have compliance scenarios, some folks don't. And so how all that works is going to be very unique to every individual organization. Whereas you can generally consume Copilot, but the specifics of your organization could give you needs to be customized so that your organization is ready to be consumed by Copilot. That's the best way I know how to say it. So with that, I don't want to belabor it anymore. We're at top of the hour. So the winner for the security identity analysis is Daniel Jordan. Still on the call, I believe. Chrissy, let me know that, and I appreciate that, Daniel. Congratulations on that. Don't forget to fill out this survey with the QR code and enter for a $100 Amazon gift certificate. And folks, if you have any questions, by all means, reach out to us as soon as you'd like. We're working on this. And don't forget, BTS is coming up February 29th. That's our Business Technology Summit. There will be a lot more Copilot specific, all the way down to Dynamics, is Copilot and all that stuff. We'll have all those sessions going, I am positive, at that particular event. So make sure you're watching for that as well. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Jared, Kevin, thank you so much. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day and a great weekend as it's coming up. Take care.
Bye.